afternoon, Green Biz. Woo, that's better. I have got 12 minutes to make the case for why we need to think differently about change and why our mindsets could be the big unlock. Why changing our mindsets could change everything. So why do we need to do change differently? Well, I don't need to remind you of where we are at this present moment in time. It's full of both opportunity but also peril. And the reality is that as a sustainability profession, even though we've tried so hard, and I've been at this game now for longer than I care to remember, we haven't quite got where we need to get to. If we look at the forward trajectory of many of the trends, environmental trends, societal trends, we're not quite on track. Well, in fact, that's such a British euphemism for we're really, really not on track to deliver the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, the ambition of the Sustainable Development Goals even. And why is that? Why haven't we made as much progress as we might like? Well, we know that there is short-termism that we have to contend with, vested interests. And as a previous speaker was saying, we've just spent so long wrestling the E away from the S and operating in silos. But I think for me, there's one fundamental reason why we haven't made the progress that we want to see, which is that we've had a tendency to put, if you're an American, Band-Aid solutions on issues. If you're a British person, a plaster. But nonetheless, what we haven't done is we haven't addressed the root causes of the challenges that we face. And the root causes are how the world works around us. It's how the systems around us are configured. What we have done is just put sticking plaster, Band-Aid. We've tried to make existing systems better. We've settled for incremental change. And so that's why, for me right now, we really are at a crossroad. Joel talked about this at the very beginning of today's session. What is the story we want to tell ourselves? And I really do feel this very deeply at this moment in time. We can take, for sake of argument, that left-hand side path, which is the path that we're on, where we'll keep incrementalism foremost in our minds, where if we're lucky, we could end up with a slightly better version of the future that we have, the present that we have today, a slightly better energy system, slightly better food system, slightly better approaches to community resilience. Or we can change how we do change, and we can take the second path, a path that is really characterized by deep systemic transformation, a path that we haven't trodden before, but a path that is open to us. And that's very real. If we think about all these transitions in the energy system, the food system right now, they are in transition. There's a risk that these transitions may, and forum language alerts, they might be shallow. So there's a path to 100% renewable energy where we haven't dealt with the human rights issues in supply chains, where we actually have had to go to Mars because we've run out of rare earth metals. Or there's a transition to renewable energy where we don't leave anyone behind, where we reconfigure the entire system, a transition that's ecologically safe and socially just. So which pathway, then, are we going to choose? I think whatever pathway we consider, what we know we have to do is we have to raise our ambition around sustainability. And in order to understand where we need to go, it's really important to think about, well, where have we come from? We need to look back to look forward. And this little chart follows me around all the time at the moment. And for me, it's a useful way of understanding where we've come from. So we start with minimizing negative impact. We then 10, 15 years ago talked about neutrality. Note at Sustainability 2.0, the social is still largely missing. This was still largely an environmental conversation. We then, 8 years or so ago, and Forum was part of this movement along with WWF and others, we created this notion of net positive, and some of you in the audience were part of this conversation, where we realized that actually just being less bad wasn't enough. We need to put more back into society, more back into the environment than we take out. 3.0. And to be honest, I thought this was pretty ambitious. But then I began to realize that actually putting more back than you take out without shifting the underlying way that systems work would mean that if you were lightening nature to a bank, you'd always need a bailout. And so that's for me where this notion of just and regenerative, where 4.0 comes in. It's that ambition for sustainability where we're really deliberate about changing how systems work. And just a word on systems. When I talk about systems, this room is a system with all you wonderful people in it. We can talk about ecological systems such as the ocean, societal systems such as education. The world is full of interconnected, nested systems. And what we need to remember about a system, it does what the goals of the system have set out. So when we hear, oh, the food system is broken, the health system is broken, from a nerdy systems point of view, that's not strictly true. The goal of our current food system, although it is changing, is cheap food, mass-produced to market, without really proper attention to nutritional quality, without due and proper attention to impact on the environment, and certainly not paying enough attention to the wages that the farmers receive. And so that's why the system is working as it's working, because it's working to those goals. If we take our health system in Europe, our health system in the US, the goal of our health system is to fix us when we're poorly. If we then imagine what happens if you change the goal of a system, imagine a health system where the goal was to keep us well. Imagine a food system which was around goals of equitable access to nutritional food, produced in a way that regenerated ecosystems, produced in a way that drove equitable returns to farmers. The system will start to do something differently. And that's what's happening in energy right now. The energy system is shifting from access to heat and mobility to transport based on fossil fuels to access to all those heat infrastructure through renewable energy. And so that's what we're talking about just in regenerative. It's about shifting the goals of the system. A word on ESG, it's not systems change, it's somewhere between 2 and 3, but that's a whole new conversation. Not for today. So just and regenerative then. It's where we want to focus. We're focusing on working within planetary boundaries. We're thinking about creating and distributing value in new ways. We understand that as humans, we are a fundamental part of nature. COVID was a lesson in that. And it is underpinned by systems change. So this is why we need to change how we do change. This could be the new ambition for sustainability. So how then do we do that? Well, we produced this document over a year ago now in partnership with WBCSD. It's a vision and a framework for just and regenerative business. At least half of you now will be going, oh, great, just what we wanted, another framework. Thanks, Sally. Well, it's a framework with a difference, my friends. Because what we did within the BTC, as it's lovingly termed, is we spent a lot of time thinking about mindsets. Because what's become really clear is the stories we tell ourselves, our narratives, the way we interpret the world, is fundamental to how we create change. Donella Meadows was one of the early pioneers in systems change. She talked about mindsets being the deepest lever for change. And I've learned this the hard way. I've come into rooms, into boardrooms with a brilliant strategy co-created with a sustainability team, and then watched it go nowhere because what I didn't do was pay attention to mindsets. And so within the Business Transformation Campus, we talk about these 4 nested mindsets, from a risk mitigation mindset to do no harm, to repair and replenish, to this just and regenerative mindset. And the just and regenerative mindset is all around that just and regenerative approach. And there's 2 good things about this little chart. The first is it helps you understand where is the person you're talking to. Oftentimes we don't spend enough time understanding where are people on their journey, and these are nested, you can move between them, but at least you can meet people where they are. And the best thing about thinking about a just and regenerative mindset is you start to do things differently. So instead of talking about how can we reduce risk, We say, what's the potential here we're not seeing? So when we think about the environmental impacts on the food system right now, if we're thinking just about reducing impacts, we'll end up in a story of efficiency gains. But if we think, okay, what's the potential we're not seeing here? How do we mitigate these negative impacts from that just and regenerative mindset? We instantly start to think about the possibilities of regenerative agriculture. Just and regenerative is also about appreciating the urgency of operating within planetary boundaries. So if we're in that risk mitigation mindset, we may well be saying we aim to achieve net zero by 2050. But this is what we should be saying, because that radical decarbonisation is no joke, and we have to really get on with it over the next 7.5 years. And so just embracing that mindset means that you pull forward those timescales. You're willing to take an innovation gap. And another big shift is, how many people have you heard say this? What our employees and communities, or you could say, what our suppliers need is ... We assume we know, but that just a regenerative mindset is, how do we co-design solutions with these really key stakeholder groups? So instead of giving straight philanthropy to disadvantaged community groups, we think about how do we work with them to give them access to skills, expertise, pathways to market, all of those things that build resilience into the system. Thank you. We are missing a trick. To do this, it requires us to be brave, because it means that we don't have all the answers, and we need to be comfortable with being a bit vulnerable, a bit uncomfortable. We also, when we're staring at that second pathway, we need to be really, really bold and dream big. We need to hold hope and despair. For many people around the world, a just and regenerative future is off the table for the moment in time. So we need to dream big and hold hope and despair. But the best bit, my friends, is shifting your mindset does not require board approval. It does not require written permission. You can all do it. So shifting our mindsets could really change everything. And I urge you all to find your just and regenerative mindset, give a big hug, and let's get on and take that second pathway and create the future that we want. Thank you very much.